Jungkook kept one empty seat on the set list. That place was always for Jimin. Why is there blood on the piano? The question sliced through the silence, echoing in the backstage hall like the final note of a forgotten song. Jungkook stood at the edge of the rehearsal studio, his breath caught in his throat, eyes fixed on the crimson smears across the ivory keys. The others were still outside. He had been the first one in, and now the first to see it. The Yamaha Grand was never locked. No one touched it except him and Jimin. He stepped closer, heartbeat roaring in his ears. The room smelled of rain and stale perfume, the same floral trace that used to linger on Jimin's jackets after night rehearsals. The overhead lights flickered slightly, casting pale shadows on the polished floor. The blood wasn't fresh, but it was real. And beneath the piano's lid, a sheet of music fluttered gently in the draft. It bore his handwriting. Jungkook reached for it with trembling fingers. Still here, it read. The same title Jimin had whispered to him during their last fight. The same melody that had vanished along with him 5 years ago. He blinked, swallowed. The ink hadn't bled. Someone had left this here recently, deliberately. A chill crawled up his spine as he turned, half expecting to see a silhouette by the door. But the room was empty. Only the faint hum of electricity and the soft patter of rain against the windows remained. He clutched the sheet music to his chest, then carefully wiped the blood from the keys with his sleeve, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he couldn't bear to see it. Outside, the rest of the team waited for rehearsal to begin, oblivious to the storm brewing in his chest. He had promised himself not to go back, not to dig again, not after the police closed the case, not after the label erased Jimin's name from every recording, every tour plan, every memory. They told him grief would eat him alive if he let it. They were wrong. It wasn't grief. It was guilt. And it never stopped. He returned to the green room and sat in the same corner he always did, facing the door. The others joked, tuned guitars, checked lights. No one mentioned the empty seat. They never did. Because it was always there, on stage, during rehearsals, in interviews, in choreography. It was part of the design now. 5 members and 1 shadow. That 6th mic stand remained in every show, untouched. Just like the space in the set list labeled JM. Jungkook made sure of it. They called him obsessive. They called it a coping mechanism, but he knew better. It was a promise. Later that night, long after the others left, he stayed back. The studio lights were dimmed, the city humming beyond the fogged glass. He sat at the piano, hands hovering above the keys, not yet playing. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but he waited. For something, for a sign. Then he saw it, on the inside of the fallboard, written in the same delicate, left-slanted script that used to fill the margins of their notebooks. Don't stop playing, I'm listening. The world narrowed. The walls bent inward, like breath drawn too sharply. Jungkook stood so quickly his chair toppled back. He scanned the room again. The door was still closed. No sound, no movement. But on the music stand, where he'd placed the recovered sheet, a small object had been added. A pressed black rose. It had been Jimin's habit, back then, to dry petals in his journals, preserving moments like songs. This one still carried a faint scent, not decayed, fresh, as if left only hours ago. And beneath it, a torn piece of hotel stationery, bearing a name of a place he hadn't dared utter in years. Busan. He exhaled, shakily. The lights above buzzed low, and the room swam with silence again. Jungkook placed the black rose into his coat pocket, the note with it. He didn't say anything to the others the next day. Not Namjoon, not Taehyung, not even Yoongi. They had made peace with the past. They had folded the memory of Jimin into something soft and untouchable. But Jungkook was different. He didn't want peace. He wanted the truth. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to find it. Don't go to Busan, Jungkook. Namjoon's voice was razor-sharp, cutting through the early morning quiet like a blade. They stood alone in the practice room, dawn bleeding through the windows. Jungkook had barely slept. The black rose still lay in his bag, hidden between a notebook and a water bottle. He hadn't planned on telling anyone, but Namjoon had always been one step ahead, ever since the day Jimin disappeared. Jungkook didn't respond at first. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, his eyes hollow. "He was there," he finally said. "In the studio, that was his handwriting, Taehyung." "You don't know that." "I do." His tone darkened, shoulders tensing. "He left it for me." Namjoon ran a hand through his hair and exhaled heavily. "You're spiraling again." "No, I'm waking up." A beat of silence stretched between them. The air between them was thick with a history neither of them dared to say out loud. The last time they talked about Jimin like this, Jungkook had ended up in a hospital after 3 days of not sleeping, not eating, scribbling pages and pages of lyrics he never released. Namjoon stepped closer. "Even if it was him, what if this is a game? What if someone is trying to get into your head? You're too visible, too fragile right now." "I'm not fragile." Jungkook's voice cracked, betraying the opposite. "I've waited 5 years, Taehyung, 5 years of silence. 5 years of wondering if I killed him with my silence that night. If he's out there, even just watching, don't I deserve to know?" Namjoon's expression faltered. "We all do." The room fell quiet again, but the tension remained. The ghosts were no longer content with whispers. They were starting to scream. Jungkook left Seoul that night. He didn't tell anyone else. Not Taehyung, not Yoongi. Not even Sejin, who had scheduled their Japan tour press the following week. He just drove, no manager, no security detail. Just him, his phone turned off, and the old playlist Jimin had once made called after the rain stops. The road blurred beneath him. Each mile toward Busan felt like a countdown, though to what he couldn't say. Every building, every overpass held a memory. Late-night runs, shared secrets, fights and reconciliations, laughter that echoed too loud, tears that fell too quiet. He arrived at the address from the note, a crumbling ryokan on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place forgotten by time. The reception was unmanned. A bell sat uselessly on the counter. Room 304. He ascended the stairs slowly. Each creak beneath his boots sounded like a warning. When he reached the door, his hand hovered above the handle for a moment. Then he turned it. The room was empty. Dust coated the window sills. The curtains were pulled halfway. A single candle sat unlit on the low table. The bed was untouched. But the air held a scent, faint, fleeting like the same perfume from the rehearsal room. He stepped inside and saw it immediately, a small cassette recorder placed on the floor in front of the mirror. He pressed play. A soft whir, then static. Then a voice. His voice. "You always run, Jimin, but this time I won't follow." The recording stopped. Jungkook stumbled back, throat dry. He remembered that night, the night of the fight. It was raining. He had been drunk, angry, reckless. They had fought over the choreography, over the pressure, over the things no one ever says on camera. He remembered shouting that line. But he had never recorded it. Someone had. The door creaked. Jungkook turned sharply, his heart in his throat, but no one was there. Instead, another envelope slid under the door. He rushed to it, ripped it open. A photograph fell into his hands. It was him and Jimin. At the beach. Smiling. Except this photo had never existed. They had never taken it. He knew it. Because in the photo, Jimin wore a ring Jungkook had only seen once, in secret, a ring with a tiny engraving on the inside. JK. He had given it to Jimin the week before the world fell apart, in a moment of clarity, of something more than friendship. They had never talked about it again. But in the photo, Jimin's fingers curled around it protectively, as if he had never taken it off. Jungkook sat on the floor, the photo trembling in his hands. Then his phone buzzed. No number, just a message. "Stop chasing ghosts." He stared at the screen, then typed back. "Tell me where he is." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then nothing. The silence after was unbearable. He returned to Seoul the next day with a storm in his chest. He barely spoke. He didn't answer questions. When Taehyung cornered him in the studio, asking where he'd been, Jungkook only said, "Looking for the truth." But the cracks were showing. He was distracted during rehearsals, forgetting cues he'd performed 100 times. He snapped at the choreographer. Yoongi pulled him aside after practice. "You need to pull yourself together, Jungkook." "I'm trying." "Are you? Because it feels like you're trying to burn everything down just to see what's left." Jungkook's hands clenched. "He's alive." Yoongi flinched, not visibly, but enough. "You sound like you did back then. You remember what that did to you." "This is different." Yoongi stared at him for a long time. If he is alive and he hasn't come back, maybe there's a reason. The words hit harder than intended. Jungkook said nothing. He left the studio early that night, alone. But he didn't go home. Instead, he went to the Han River, where they used to sit, where they made promises they never kept. And under the cold, blue lights of the bridge, he found something waiting for him. A notebook. Leather-bound, familiar. He opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, the first page held only one sentence. "I never left. You just stopped looking in the right places." His vision blurred. He looked up and swore he saw a figure just beyond the railing, walking away. Short dark hair. A black coat. No umbrella. He ran, fast, shouting, lungs burning. But by the time he reached the spot, it was empty. Only wet footprints remained, fatting fast on the pavement. Jungkook stood in the rain, soaked, breathless, and shaking. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What if he doesn't want to be found? The words came from Taehyung, cold and biting, slamming into Jungkook like a wave he didn't see coming. They were in the recording booth, just the two of them, after hours. The others had left. Rain lashed against the soundproof glass as if trying to claw its way inside. Jungkook had just shown him the notebook, the one left by the river. The one that bore Jimin's handwriting, unmistakable, intimate. Taehyung had flipped through it wordlessly, his brows lowering with every page, until he finally snapped it shut and tossed it onto the table like it had burned him. "I said," he repeated, "what if he doesn't want to be found?" Jungkook leaned forward, voice trembling. "You think this is some kind of game?" "I think it's over," Taehyung replied, eyes sharp. "And you're dragging the rest of us back into a grave." "He's not dead." "Then maybe he wishes he was." Jungkook recoiled like he'd been struck. Taehyung's jaw tensed. "I'm tired, Jungkook. Tired of rehearsing with a ghost. Tired of pretending the empty mic stand isn't driving all of us insane. You're not the only one who loved him." "Then why did you all forget him so easily?" Jungkook shot back. "Why am I the only one who still?" "Because we had to survive," Taehyung roared, slamming his fist onto the mixing console. "Because watching you fall apart nearly destroyed the group. Because every time we say his name, we lose a piece of you, and we can't afford to lose you too." The silence that followed was suffocating. Jungkook's eyes burned, his throat tight. He turned away, fists clenched so hard his nails cut into his palms. "You didn't see the things I saw, the messages, the cassette. That photo wasn't fake. The ring." Taehyung's voice dropped, lower now, but no less furious. "Then ask yourself why he'd leave all this behind and never come back. Maybe it's not you he's punishing. Maybe it's all of us." Jungkook didn't answer. He left the room without another word, leaving the notebook behind. Outside, the city was still drowning in rain. He walked without direction, hoodie pulled over his head, headphones in but playing nothing. His mind was louder than any song. The fight replayed in his head, but more than that, Taehyung's voice, raw and cracked when he said, "You're not the only one who loved him." He stopped at a crosswalk. Then, on impulse, he turned down a side street, when he hadn't walked in years. The alley behind Studio M. Back when they were still trainees, it had been their escape route. Jimin used to joke it was their confession room. When the pressure got too much, when the cameras were too close, they'd meet there. No questions, no judgments, just truth. He didn't expect anyone to be there. But someone was. A man in a cap, leaning against the graffiti-stained wall, smoking with one hand tucked into his coat. Jungkook's heart seized. He took a step forward, unsure, every nerve in his body lighting up. The man didn't flinch. Then he spoke. "You're late." The voice was hoarse, familiar, a shade too deep. Jungkook's breath caught. He ran forward, reckless, desperate. "Jimin." The man turned. But it wasn't him. The face was older, eyes colder. There was a scar on his cheek that Jimin never had. Jungkook stopped abruptly, throat tightening. "Who are you?" The man dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "You've been stirring ghosts that should stay buried." "What do you know about Jimin?" He smirked, cruel. "I know he wasn't who you thought he was. None of you knew him." "You're lying." The man leaned in, voice dropping. "There are things you were never meant to find, but since you're so eager." He pulled something from his coat pocket. A flash drive. He shoved it into Jungkook's hand and turned away. "If you're smart, you'll destroy it." Then he disappeared into the rain. Back in his apartment, Jungkook stared at the drive for a long time before finally plugging it into his laptop. One folder. One file. Confession Room 203, MP4. He clicked it. The video was grainy, night vision, the alley behind Studio M. Jimin sat on the ground, knees drawn up to his chest. He looked thinner. His hair was longer, messier. His face was bruised. He was crying. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "They said it's either this or I vanish for real. I didn't think it would go this far." He looked up at the camera. "Jungkook, if you ever see this, I'm sorry. I didn't want to lie to you, but they made me." Static. The video ended. Jungkook stared at the screen, shaking. His hands trembled so violently the laptop nearly slid off his knees. 100 questions screamed in his head. Who were they? What lie? Why the bruises? Why him? He opened the video again. Paused it at Jimin's face. Then he noticed something he missed the first time. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, a logo. A stylized letter H, surrounded by thorns. He'd seen that before. Years ago. On the contract proposal from a private sub-label, the company tried to bury. A label tied to silent scandals, rumored disappearances, talent control, whispers in the industry. Helivra Entertainment. And Jimin had been involved. His phone rang suddenly, yanking him from the spiral. Unknown number. He answered, heart racing. A voice, muffled low. "You're in danger. Stop looking." Then the line went dead. Jungkook sat frozen in the dark, rain still tapping on his window like fingers from another world. This wasn't just a disappearance anymore. It was a cover-up, and he had just torn the first stitch loose. Episode 4, The Label Below. The storm outside hadn't stopped, and neither had the one inside Jungkook. He hadn't left the apartment for 2 days. The confession video kept playing on loop in his head, Jimin's bruised face, his voice cracking beneath the weight of something unspeakable. Every time Jungkook closed his eyes, he saw it again. That logo in the corner, Helivra Entertainment. He remembered the rumors. Trainees who signed contracts but never debuted, artists who disappeared just before comeback, contracts with blank pages, allegations of psychological conditioning disguised as image reinforcement. All denied, all buried. And Jimin had been caught in it. He had tried to say something years ago, subtle, quiet signals Jungkook ignored, too blinded by stardom and schedule. There had been nights Jimin wouldn't speak, just stare at the ceiling of their dorm. Nights he trembled in his sleep and woke with a scream he choked down before anyone heard. But Jungkook had heard, and he hadn't asked. Now it was too late for apologies. He needed answers. The only place to start was at the company's old training building, now vacant, officially. But Jungkook knew not everything vanished with a press release. That night he drove alone again, hood up, mask on. The building loomed like a husk in the city's underbelly, windows cracked. Signage rusted like a memory gone rotten. The parking lot was empty. He stepped inside. Silence, dust, a faint hum in the walls like something breathing behind the concrete. He moved carefully, phone light in hand. Training mats still lay on the floor of Studio 2. A row of lockers stood half open. He found an old nameplate, Jimin Park, still taped to one door. He opened it. Empty, except for a photo, curled and yellowing. It was the 6 of them, pre-debut, sweat, smiles, and aching eyes. Someone had scratched out Jimin's face with red ink. Looking for ghosts. The voice came from behind. Jungkook turned, startled, and found a woman leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. She wore all black, sharp jawline, cold eyes, and a silver badge clipped to her coat. On Sira Internal Affairs. Jungkook stared. "You're with the company." "Used to be," she said flatly, "until I asked too many questions." He didn't trust her, but he didn't have the luxury to be cautious. "Did you know Jimin?" She walked in slowly, glancing around. Everyone knew Jimin, the boy with the too soft voice and too loud heart. He was marked from the beginning. They saw it in him, pliable, pure, a perfect subject. For what? She looked him dead in the eye. Persona manipulation. Jungkook's stomach dropped. Sira kept speaking, voice like glass shattering with every word. They used experimental conditioning, verbal, auditory, even pharmaceutical, all under the guise of performance enhancement. Confidence boosting, they called it. "No, that's not, he wouldn't." Jungkook's voice cracked. "He didn't know," she said softly. "None of them did, not until it was too late. Jimin figured it out the night he disappeared. He tried to run. And you let them erase him." "I tried to stop it," her voice faltered. "I was too late. They shut the unit down the next morning, moved him, made him disappear." Jungkook felt his knees weaken. "Where is he?" Sira hesitated. "Then there's one facility left, off the books, underground." She slid him a keycard. "You didn't get this from me." "Why are you helping me?" She didn't answer, just stared at him a moment longer, then walked away. Jungkook stared at the card. He returned to the parking lot, heart a wildfire. He drove straight to the address Sira had given him, a high-rise in Gangnam, unmarked, corporate. Nothing suspicious, just another glass building reflecting the lives of people too busy to look deeper. In the lobby, no one stopped him. He swiped the card in the elevator. The button for B4 lit up. The descent was slow, cold. When the doors opened, everything changed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The hallway was sterile, white, and humming. Security cameras followed his every move. Doors lined the walls, metal heavy, numbered. He passed B408, B409. Then he saw it. B413. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, darkness. He stepped in and froze. The walls were covered in photos, floor to ceiling, photos of him, of the group, rehearsals, interviews, candid moments no one should have captured. And at the center, taped over a mirror, a photo of Jimin. But not the Jimin he remembered. His eyes were hollow, his smile forced. The date scrawled beneath it, April 17, 2021, 2 days before he vanished. Jungkook stepped closer. "Jungkook." He spun around. The voice was real. And it came from the door. Jimin stood there. Alive. Paler, thinner, but unmistakably him. Time collapsed. Jungkook's breath vanished. The world blurred. "Is it really?" he began, voice breaking. "I didn't want you to see me like this," Jimin said softly, eyes glistening. "I didn't want you to see what they did. I thought you were dead." "I was, in every way that mattered." They stared at each other, two versions of the same pain staring back. "Why didn't you come back?" Jungkook whispered. Jimin stepped into the room slowly, like the light hurt. "Because I didn't know if I was still real, if I could trust my memories, my thoughts. Everything I was, it's all fractured. They made me someone else." "Who?" Jimin shook his head. "They called it the blank project, strip the artist, rebuild the persona, perfect obedience, perfect branding. Jungkook swallowed hard. They turned you into a product. No, Jimin said bitterly. They turned me into a ghost. Jungkook moved closer, eyes wide. We're getting out of here, now. Jimin hesitated. It's not that simple. It is, Jungkook snapped. You're coming with me, I'm not losing you again. Jimin looked like he wanted to believe him. He opened his mouth to speak. Then the lights went out. Sirens wailed. A voice rang through the speakers. Unauthorized access detected. B4 lockdown initiated. Doors slammed down the hall. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's hand. We have to run. Red emergency lights pulsed across the corridor like a heartbeat, painting everything in warning. Jungkook gripped Jimin's hand tightly as they sprinted down the white, windowless hallway, the alarm's shrill cry piercing the air. The metallic clang of security doors slamming shut echoed behind them, one after another, sealing their way back, caging them in. Where are we going? Jungkook shouted, breath ragged. There's a maintenance shaft past B419, Jimin replied. If they haven't welded it shut. What happens if they have? Jimin didn't answer. They skidded around a corner, shoes screeching on the linoleum. A security camera above tilted sharply, tracking their movement. Sparks popped from a panel on the wall. The place was turning against them, like it wasn't just a facility, but a thing alive and furious. The hall ended at a thick steel door marked B419. Jimin shoved a shoulder into it. It groaned open just enough for them to slip through. Inside, the room was pitch black, save for the red glow leaking in behind them. Jungkook flicked his phone light on. The room was bare, except for a massive metal grate in the floor. That's it, Jimin panted, pointing. Help me. Together, they pried the grate loose. It clanged to the side with a sound like a scream. Cold air surged upward from the shaft. It smelled of rust, oil, and dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. You first, Jungkook said. No, Jimin insisted, shaking his head. You don't know the path, I'll lead. Jungkook hesitated, then nodded. Jimin swung his legs into the hole and dropped, landing with a grunt. Jungkook followed, climbing down into the darkness. The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Pipes ran alongside them, dripping. The silence down here was different, not the absence of sound, but the pressure of it, like the world above no longer existed. How long have you been here? Jungkook asked quietly as they crawled. Since they moved me out of Seoul, Jimin whispered back. After the night I left. You didn't leave, Jungkook said. You were taken. Jimin went quiet. I saw the video, Jungkook added. The alley, the confession room. They made me film that, Jimin said, voice tight. They told me you would come looking. They wanted you too. Why? To see if it worked. Jungkook froze. What worked? The conditioning. Jimin turned, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. You were the test. The words sank like ice into Jungkook's veins. Me. They watched how you reacted, how long you'd keep the seat open, how many times you'd say my name on stage, how much your music changed. They recorded everything, every breakdown, every obsession. Jungkook shook his head in disbelief. They used my grief as part of an experiment. Jimin nodded. Your love was their variable. Jungkook's chest caved inward. He wanted to scream, to punch through the pipes, to destroy everything that had ever touched them. But instead, he kept crawling. He could feel Jimin trembling ahead of him, not from fear, but from shame. None of that was your fault, Jungkook said finally. You hear me. I let them in, Jimin said. I signed the paper, I was the first. He paused, because I was scared, because I didn't want to be forgotten. Jungkook crawled forward, placed a hand on Jimin's back. You never were, he whispered. They reached the end of the shaft, a vertical drop with an old maintenance ladder clinging to the side. At the bottom, a faint green glow. Jimin went down first. As Jungkook followed, he heard movement above them. Footsteps. Climbing fast. Jungkook looked up and saw them, men in black uniforms. No faces, just helmets, guns. Jimin, go, they're coming. They hit the ground and ran, bursting into a sub-basement full of old electrical panels and forgotten machines. The place hummed with a low, mechanical groan. A door ahead. Jimin punched a code into a hidden keypad. The door opened. They stepped through, and into blinding white. An office. Clean, silent, and occupied. 3 people sat behind a long black table, hands folded, eyes unreadable, all dressed in white. In the center, a woman stood, her back turned. She turned slowly. It was on Sira. But something was different. Her expression had changed. It wasn't pity anymore. It was pride. I knew you'd find him, she said to Jungkook. You've done well. Jungkook stepped back. What is this? Sira smiled. You think this was about rescuing Jimin? No, this was about proving the model. Jimin flinched beside him. Jungkook's voice cracked. What the hell are you talking about? The blank project was never about erasing artists. It was about control. Can you manufacture loyalty, grief, love? Can you build a perfect performer by breaking the person they love? She stepped forward. You passed every stage. Denial, rage, obsession. You kept the seat open. You changed your sound. You made him immortal. You lied to me, Jungkook whispered. You used me. We needed you. Jimin's fists clenched. You said if I cooperated, he'd be safe. He is safe, Sira said. And now so are you. You've both served your purpose. We're leaving, Jungkook growled. You're not, she replied. You're going on tour. Jungkook stared at her, not comprehending. Sira tilted her head. You think the world's ready for the reunion? For the grand return? The lost member comes back. The empty seat is filled. Imagine the headlines, the streams, the tears. You're insane. No, she said. I'm a producer. Jimin looked shattered. Jungkook turned to him. You don't have to do this. We don't have to play their game. They'll ruin you, Jimin whispered. If I walk away again, they'll destroy everything you've built. I don't care about any of that, Jungkook said fiercely. I care about you. Behind them, the guards entered. Guns lowered. Ready. Sira stepped back. You have a choice. Jungkook stood between them and Jimin. And said nothing. Because he knew. No matter what he chose. They had already taken everything. The silence in the white room stretched like a blade between them. Jungkook's heart thundered in his chest, but his voice was steady when he spoke. You don't get to decide what we are, not anymore. Sira gave him a slow, almost pitying smile. You don't understand, Jungkook. This isn't about what I want. It never was. This is about what the world wants, and the world wants a resurrection. Jimin stepped forward then, shoulders square, eyes hard. You think you can force us on stage, parade us like dolls, and call it a comeback? You misunderstand, said one of the silent men behind the table. His voice was smooth, too smooth. You already agreed. Jimin turned sharply. What? The man slid a document across the black table. A thick folder. His name was printed on the cover. Jimin stepped closer. He opened it. Jungkook saw his face drain of color. What is that? He asked. Jimin didn't answer. His hands were shaking. Sira took the folder gently from his fingers and turned it so Jungkook could see. Page after page, contracts, recordings, confidentiality waivers. And at the bottom, signatures. Jimin's. But not just from years ago. Recent dates, months ago, weeks ago. Jungkook stared, stunned. You signed these. No, Jimin whispered. I never saw these, I didn't. Sira tapped a pen against the paper. Electronic consent, voice ID, retinal scans. You agreed, Jimin. Every time you entered a room, every time you sat for a wellness session, every blood test, you were authorizing your own rebranding. Jimin took a shaky step back, as if the paper itself was poisoning him. Jungkook turned to Sira, voice rising. You forged everything. We didn't need to forge anything, she said calmly. We just made him believe he had no choice. The mind is fragile when it's pushed far enough. You manipulated him, Jungkook snapped. And now you want me to dance beside him like nothing happened. We don't want that, said the man at the table. We want you to believe it. A screen behind them flickered on. A news report played. Jungkook and Jimin together. Candid photos that never existed. Footage deep-faked with surgical precision. A story already in motion. The headline, Park Jimin returns to stage with Jungkook, setlist finally complete. Jungkook felt the room tilt. They've already announced it, Jimin whispered. They've already written the story. Sira nodded. You see, it's easier this way. Let the world believe in miracles, in brotherhood, in healing. Jungkook looked at the images on the screen. Two men smiling, laughing, embracing. Lies. You're insane if you think we'll just go along with this. You don't have a choice, the man said. Neither of you. Jungkook stepped forward, rage boiling beneath his skin. What do you want from us? Sira met his gaze, and for the first time her voice softened. I want you to survive. She looked at Jimin, and I want him to be remembered as more than a ghost. You don't care about him, Jungkook hissed. You care about the myth, the clicks, the numbers. Sira didn't deny it. Jimin's voice was barely a breath. What happens if we say no? Another silence, heavy. Then the man behind the table answered. You disappear again. Jungkook's blood went cold. Both of you. Jimin stepped in front of Jungkook. No, not him. Leave him out of this. We can't, said the man. He's part of you, now forever. You made him the martyr, the loyal one, the last believer. You made the story too good. The audience won't forgive you if you walk away now. Jungkook spoke through gritted teeth. So this is all just scripted. Everything is scripted, Jungkook, Sira replied. Even grief. He snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing the folder and hurling it across the room. Pages flew like broken wings. Jimin flinched as the security guards tensed, but Sira raised a hand to stop them. She stepped closer. You still have a way out. Jungkook's voice was venom. I don't want your mercy. Not mercy, she said. An agreement, one final performance, a private showcase, just the two of you. We record it. We release it. A gift to the fans. Closure. You do this and we disappear for good. Jimin looked at her wary. You'll let us go. We'll delete the contracts. The footage, wipe your files from the system. You'll walk out clean. And if we do? She said nothing. But the walls said everything. Jungkook's pulse roared. How do we know we can trust you? You don't, Sira said simply. But ask yourself, wouldn't you rather write the ending yourself? She dropped a flash drive into his palm. The stage is already built. You have 1 week. They were escorted out. No more threats. No violence, just silence. The kind that screams. Back at Jungkook's apartment, they sat in the dark. Jimin sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at his hands. I don't know who I am anymore, he said. Sometimes I think I'm just whatever they made me into. You're still you, Jungkook said, even if they tried to erase it. Jimin shook his head. I don't even remember writing half those songs. My own voice feels foreign. Jungkook got up, walked to the shelf, and pulled out a weathered notebook. Then, let's remember together. He placed the notebook in front of him. Lyrics, chords, memories. Jimin opened it slowly. His fingers hesitated on the page. Then they began to move. They spent the next 5 days in the studio. No producers, no staff, just the two of them, rewriting the past in melodies and harmonies, lyric by lyric, every word a wound, every chord a confession. On the 6th night, they entered the studio Sira had provided. The cameras were already set up. No audience. Just them. 1 mic. 1 piano. They sat down. And sang. Not for the company. Not for the fans. But for themselves. When it ended, neither of them spoke. Jimin closed his eyes. Jungkook reached over and pressed delete on the master file. The screen went black. They stood, hand in hand. and walked out of the building, into the night, not as idols, not as victims, but as two men who refused to be rewritten. The headlines never came. No triumphant return, no breaking news, no comeback stage. What the world got was silence. Just as suddenly as the rumors had surfaced, they vanished. The photos, the fan theories, the viral threads all disappeared like smoke caught in sunlight. There were whispers, of course. Fans speculated. Edits surfaced. Still Here trended for a day on memory alone. But without footage, without a trace, it all faded into myth. Just as they had planned. It was Yoongi who first noticed. He stood backstage at their next Seoul Dome rehearsal, flipping through the latest version of the setlist, when his eyes caught on a line that hadn't been there before. Track 14, Ghost in Harmony FT, JM. He turned slowly, gaze falling on the stage. The mic stand was still there, still untouched. But this time, the lighting had changed. A soft, pale glow wrapped around it, not the cold spotlight of loss, but something gentler, reverent, like memory without pain. Namjoon approached beside him. He left it there, he said quietly. Didn't ask for permission, just updated the list. Yoongi didn't need to ask who he was. They both knew. And that night, when the concert began, Jungkook stood center stage. Hair damp from sweat, eyes locked forward. He said nothing before the song started. He just looked toward the sixth mic stand, then toward the audience. And when the first note of Ghost in Harmony echoed through the dome, it was Jungkook's voice that opened the song. It was Jimin's. Not a recording, not a hologram, but his voice, woven into the music, imperfect, real, raw. The crowd erupted into stunned silence, then into tears, because they knew. Somehow they all knew. Jimin wasn't on the stage, but he was there. In the melody, in the breath between the words, in the way Jungkook closed his eyes when the final chorus hit, like he was remembering something that no longer hurt to hold. No one ever saw Jimin in public after that. No photos, no statements, just stories. A fan swore she saw him sketching in a park in Prague. Another claimed he worked at a quiet little cafe in Kyoto, where the lattes always came with a black rose drawn in foam. Someone mailed a pressed flower to Big Hit with no return address and a note inside. Still here. But nothing was confirmed. And that was how they wanted it. Years passed. Jungkook continued making music, but it was different now. Lighter, still haunted sometimes, but not by pain, by presence. He never removed the sixth mic stand. He never filled the seat. But he never left it empty either. It stood as it always had, quiet, waiting. Until one final concert. 10 years after Jimin's disappearance. Jungkook walked on stage alone that night, greeted by a sea of purple lights. He looked older, wiser, weathered by time but still burning with something unshakable. He walked to center stage. No theatrics, no intro. And then he turned to the sixth mic stand. I kept the seat open, he said, voice thick. Not because I was waiting, but because it was yours. A hush fell over the crowd. He stepped back. And for the first time in a decade, a second figure walked out from the shadows. Face hidden under a black hoodie. No intro, no name. Just presence. The arena didn't scream. It gasped, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Jungkook turned to the figure, tears slipping freely now. You ready? The figure nodded, then pulled the hood down. It was Jimin. No longer a ghost. No longer a product. Just a man. Alive. They sang together, and the world finally heard what it had been missing. Not perfection. Not spectacle. Just two voices. Healing. The setlist was complete. And the empty seat was no longer empty.